I want to talk about something that is really important to me because I feel that so many women I know, including me, so many of my friends, so many women of different generations are struggling with this, still are struggling with this, even maybe more are struggling with this than before. And it's about women's connection to their own bodies, more so the disconnection from their own bodies and the high level of some type of body dysmorphia that so many women have experienced in the last decades and also today, and the self-hate and the struggles that come with that. So if you're struggling with this and if you're sensitive to these topics, trigger warning. However, if you have ever struggled with a distorted self-perception and experienced being very alienated or disconnected from your body, even if it's in a subtle way, this might be actually a conversation for you. And I do hope that in case some people are going to listen to this, that it finds exactly those who need to hear these thoughts at exact this moment. Because, sometimes you need to hear something said in a certain way or hear the experience of another person to relate or have a bit of an aha moment. Or you need to hear something again in order to gain clarity and hopefully heal or move on. So the topic of women's disconnection from their own bodies has been always present for me, but it has becoming more present in the last weeks because I've been talking to friends about it. And I've also had an experience that I feel like brought me a little bit of clarity and healing because I was able to develop a little bit of a new perspective about it. And the other day, one of my mentors, Brooke Sullivan, was mentioning the importance of sharing and expressing our insights because they might be helpful and beneficial to someone else. And then it has this kind of ripple effect. And what I really liked was she added the thought that it's not the time to gatekeep our healing tools and our healing insights. So record my thoughts and my experience, and maybe I'll release the recording for some of you to hear as a first episode of a podcast that I don't have yet. So my name is Laura, and I'm very interested in holistic healing in general. I have been on a deep learning journey about holistic healing for about a decade now, I would say. And I've been trained in Ayurveda counseling and have done yoga teacher trainings. And currently I'm learning about flower essences. And I love reading and storytelling and mysterious things and learning about the universe. But it also has always been important to me to understand and think about how we can create a better and happier world together. And I've always had this activist in me. And today, still, so many women have a distorted self-perception, a distorted perception of how they look. And so many women don't like their bodies, find themselves ugly, or cannot even look at themselves in pictures or in a mirror, at least not without makeup or filters or a bunch of things that enhance or change their appearance in any way. And for so many women, and I'm talking especially about the ones that have been socialized in Western culture, this has turned into hating their own bodies and the way they look naturally and the look of their face and their appearance and really not feeling home in their bodies. And so far, in almost all the Ayurvedic coaching sessions I've done with female clients, this has been a topic that came up. And I feel it's just heartbreaking, because feeling home in our bodies kind of should be the baseline of having a good human experience. And I feel that, women not feeling good about themselves, their natural selves has become completely normalized. And there are body positivity movements and feminist movements like that. But the issue runs so deep that most of them are just scratching the surface level. Because from what we see and what we know, almost most women in previous generations and also younger generations, we've grown up questioning our bodies, our faces, and cultivating this form of disconnection from our natural being. And for many of us, this turns into self-hate and self-destructive behavior. Just to have a few numbers, I asked AI to give me a statistic and research about body dissatisfaction and self-hate. And in one of them, it said 91% of women report being unhappy with their bodies and resort to dieting to achieve their ideal body shape. And another one said, by the age of 13, 53% of American girls are unhappy with their bodies. This number grows to 78% by the age of 17. Another one said that women are 2.5 times more likely than men to experience body dissatisfaction. So men are not excluded from this issue, but far more women are affected by this problem. And we know this, right? And it's just heartbreaking because women have been carrying this pain for decades, if not centuries. Although, of course, before media and before, tabloids, camera, social media, the obsession with bodies and looks was definitely less. This has just become kind of the new status quo, but it's just so weird because it's not natural. It's not a natural thing to do, and it's not about whether or not someone is born objectively more beautiful than others, and others have to kind of work their way up if they want to compete, kind of like the survival of the fittest in nature, although that might play a part, but it's not about that. It's something cultural and it's way deeper. And me personally, for so long, I felt like this self-questioning was my problem and was my fault. Because I feel like we either don't reflect on it and are just living disconnected from our bodies and perceive that as a kind of normal, or we ask ourselves, why can't I just love myself? What is wrong with me? And then we're like spending hours and hours and euros and dollars on self-improvement and self-improvement products or self-love classes and self-love meditations. But I feel like we haven't even paused at all or even long enough to ask, why do we even have to learn how to love ourselves, and why is it so hard? I want to share an experience I had. So I was looking in the mirror and I saw something I didn't like, something I perceived maybe as not ideal or as wrong, and I don't know about you, but many of us have really trained ourselves to look for and even obsess over parts of our bodies and faces and appearance that we don't like. But I had this moment where I caught myself judging my body when I feel like it just clicked and I realized, wait a minute, what the hell am I doing? All this is not mine. This is not mine. Like all these horrible feelings that I have in those moments, and all these horrible moments I've had in my life because I started to obsess about imperfection or something I didn't like, and therefore to disconnect from my body and hate my body. All those moments are not mine. They're not coming from me. They're not coming from myself. And all of a sudden, this was so clear and apparent to me that I wasn't born like this, questioning myself. And I started to feel really sad and also angry about this kind of reality that we've been creating, where we constantly question our own bodies, which are literally just our vessel that is just getting us through life. And from a more neutral perspective, with our human brain's awareness, it's probably normal and healthy to see your own reflection and ask yourself some questions. Like, is that what I look like? Like when you observe a child or a toddler seeing themselves in the mirror and recognizing themselves. But then, of course, it should be normal, and also it would be way more healthy to kind of just be neutral about this self-reflection, or even happy and fascinated about what you see in the mirror and the reflection, that unique expression of life. But the amount of women that have the tendency to look at themselves in the mirror and say, what I see, this natural, authentic expression, the way I was born, it's not right. I have to change something. Like I have to do a diet, or I have to get like surgery, or I have to put on 2 hours of makeup before I can leave the house. That is Western culture that has been imprinted in our brains. And therefore, in a way, I do believe it's a colonized mind. It's internalized patriarchy and it's internalized capitalism. And in order to heal from that, I believe it's really important to first acknowledge that these doubts don't come from our own hearts. They don't come from our own intuition or our own inner wisdom. They come from a system that is basically living inside of us, like a parasite. And it's so sneaky because it lives in our thoughts and our choices and our comparisons and our shame. And that is so deeply ingrained that it feels like our own voice. So I do feel like this internalized system, and I have heard other women expressing it like that, has enslaved us from within. It makes us feel that we have a prison in our own mind that is not even ours, if we are really honest. And patriarchy has taken so much from us, from people of all gender, actually, over generations. And there are many strong and brave people, and especially women out there, trying to heal their female lineages from lifetimes where women and the feminine was systematically silenced and abused. And meanwhile, we're dealing with the current ongoing systemic oppression like pay inequality, underfunding of medical research on women's bodies, active suppression of rights like abortion rights. And by the way, if you think that we've overcome inequality because women now have the chance to choose a career and become basically anything they want and have voting rights and, can be financially free and happy and wild in the Western world, I would really recommend to read that book, Invisible Women, that shows research on how our world is built on the collection of data. But at the same time, it fails basically everywhere in almost all areas of life when it comes to collecting gender-specific data on women's realities. And therefore, it shows how we're continuously shaping and designing a world for men. There are so many important things to talk about when looking at how the patriarchy messed up the feminine that are really important because we are still suffering from it or we are still healing from it. For example, how industrialization has forced us into lives where our value lies in our productiveness, our performance, or how capitalism as a system taught us that is safest for our survival and thriving in this world to strive alone, disconnected from community, or how the rationalization since the so-called Enlightenment has told us that the female body is something to overcome and emotions are something to overcome and motherhood is a part of an ecosystem of production, or how nature has become something to be used and to be exploited and extracted from, and how this totally has disconnected us from this higher intelligence that is nature that we are part of, and how it therefore has disconnected us from ourselves. I do find one of the really heartbreaking topics, because it's really living inside of us, is the forced disconnection from our authentic way of being in our bodies and the embodiment that has been taken from us. And this, I feel it has a really dystopian feel to it because we were literally brainwashed into believing that the destructive beliefs and thoughts we have about our bodies and appearance are our own and that they are our own truth. And therefore, maybe the most insidious example of internalized patriarchy is the beauty industry, actually. Because most stuff and products that is sold to us, women within the beauty industry, is sold to us as empowerment and something that, is supposed to help us reaching happiness and excellence and our highest potential somehow, and don't get me wrong, of course, women, we do love beauty, we love beautiful things, and especially women naturally gravitate to beautiful things. And there's so much good that came out and comes from the beauty industry and continues to make us feel good and happy and somehow enhances our experience. But I guess most people would agree that beauty nowadays has become very toxic, and that the idea of enhancing and playing with beauty and our appearance has been twisted by becoming an industry that, rather than really offering something for women's well-being and happiness, lives off and thrives only because of women's permanent state of not enoughness. And of course, beauty ideals change over time, but the industry dogma in our lifetimes in Western culture has been stay young and pretty and skinny, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on a certain time and a moment and in culture. And I feel that it used to be a lot about bodies and being skinny, and today it's more about having a perfect face and perfect skin and not aging, like preventing aging at all costs. And there's so many strange beauty trends, and you probably seen those videos of women talking about how to change your facial expression in order to not create wrinkles, when you talk or when you smile. And basically they're recommending to dial down all your expression and not to move your face as much or differently, in order to not create wrinkles, and stay looking young, and which basically means to dial down your authentic way of laughter and expression in the world, right? And women, we have made ourselves complete slaves of these ideals, and it has by far passed, the idea of beauty as having a healthy body and maybe putting on some lipstick and mascara and having a nice haircut. It's a hyperfixation on aesthetics that is making us sick in a way, and the ideals have become so weird and alienating and also dangerous. And the industry is probably making more money from women's insecurities than ever before. We know this, and yet we are all somehow victims to it, some more obvious, some more subtle. Sometimes this also can be hidden under a mask of perfection, to make it seem more normal or endurable. So some women might say, I'm just a perfectionist. I'm striving for excellence in my looks as well as everything I do, Well, is it though? Or is it maybe the underlying fear or subconscious pattern of not feeling good enough, and what might happen if we don't look perfect? And since we internalize the ideals by being exposed to them over and over and over again, they change our perception. And it's just really interesting to think about how the normalization works, because, also calling something insecurities sounds kind of cute, right? It sounds like it's something we can fix and work a little bit on ourselves and on our own perception, and then it will be fine, right? Because we're fine, right? Again, like trying to find the problem inside of us. But the problem is that these insecurities have for so many developed into a full-on disconnection from their bodies, from their natural way of expressing, into body dysmorphia and self-hatred and disordered behavior and self-destructive behavior. And this kind of behavior only receives more attention when they get more intense, like, for example, eating disorders, which are then, when they're getting intense, pushed into the corner of mental health problems. But the disorders are not the root. They are a symptom of a lack and of a disconnection from yourself and your soul. And we need to ask ourselves, why are so many women disconnected from their self and from their heart and from their soul, like from their own truth? And there's many other examples how women are trying to, next to eating disorders, how women are trying to change or control their appearance, that are part of the bigger discussion. Even how obsessed we are with, removing our body hair, or the overtraining, like women have been and are overtraining their bodies and then lose their periods, which has also been kind of normalized. And then today, the obsession with clear skin and glowing, and that comes with buying products and after products after products in order to fix that, And then, of course, the social media and the rise of surgeries and the normalization of lip fillers and Botox and booty fillers and all these things that young women are experiencing as if it's normal. And of course, all of this is bringing in a completely new level of distortion. Like, isn't it insane that we have this need and pressure in women to do all those things, and also the kind of body dysmorphia many of us experience as a result of it? This is a sort of implanted distortion, meaning it doesn't come from within us, but it's a distortion that keeps so many women in a destructive and painful loop of always looking for something outside of ourselves for worthiness, to feel worthy, and not even worthy of having their dream life or being successful in life, but worthy of survival. Because this is telling us constantly that it is not safe for us or enough to just be. And it is also taking away the opportunity to change and grow and to age gracefully and in dignity. And life has seasons, and change is a part of life. And wrinkles and gray hair. They are telling stories, but we're not allowed to go into fall or winter of our life anymore. And we've lost the wide count of elders and having the experience of wise elders, because youth in this culture is so overvalued and life experience is so undervalued. And one of the problems is that once we're starting with these deep insecurities and questioning ourselves, we develop insecurities about our whole being. And we get disconnected not only from our bodies, but our authentic essence and expression. Because once the questioning has begun, questioning ourselves has become the default. And we're constantly questioning our worth and our unique being, you know? And this pain of constantly living in lack between what I am naturally with ease and what I'm supposed to be, or what I believe I'm supposed to be, what I have to work for, the pain of living this alive through a perception that is not even our own has fragmented the light of so many women, you know, and then the ease and the joy and the softness from just being gets taken away. And we create all these emotional and behavioral patterns that are bringing us out of balance, that are destructive and self-destructive, and that keep the feminine away from our bigger potential. And I do believe that this has been quite traumatic. And, you know, through my Ayurvedic training, I learned this word or expression in Sanskrit. It's called swasta, meaning swa means my own self, sta means to be situated or seated. So in this concept of health, true health means not only being physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually balanced, but also being rooted in your true self. So when you live in inner harmony, aligned with your innate potential, you are healthy. And when we look at our holistic health, we can ask, how well are you seated with your inherent nature? But how can we be rooted in ourselves if we're so disconnected and clouded by all the noise and the beliefs that are not even coming from ourselves, that tell us that we have to change something about ourselves? And now we're seeing how this disconnection from our body is literally making us sick. And this internalized patriarchy plays out in so many heartbreaking ways. For example, women reproducing these patterns without meaning to, like shaming other women for being too much or too little or for aging. And probably most women have experienced this, or maybe some of you have even been a woman in a moment shaming another woman. Like I saw this post of a female influencer. She's in her mid-40s and she decided to not use filters or anything like that. So, you know, you can just see that she's in her mid-40s, and the comments in the videos are, there's always comments about her skin and shaming her for looking old for her age. And, you know, I saw a comment that said, your skin is my literal nightmare, and all these kind of things. You know, we know and experienced and hear countless of stories of women who have started to then shut down their voice or their light and their expression, or lower their voice to avoid this kind of uncomfortable backlash from other women. And of course, it's super sad to see how all of this has turned women against each other. And we've become stuck in this way of living where it has become normal to bring ourselves down and others down. And this is the result of an oppressive system that we have internalized. And, you know, we know from many ancient traditions that the feminine and masculine live in all beings, but women are rooted in the yin. So in a world of duality, we are the yin in the yin-yang dynamic, and the feminine itself is creative embodiment. It's chaos. It's, you know, nature in its raw, pure form. It's also chaos. Of course, there's underlying intelligence, but the physical manifestation in its raw form, it's not necessarily controllable or predictable. It's unpredictable life force. But humans and mankind specifically have been going out of their way to domesticate this force. Maybe you've read the book Women Who Run with the Wolves, where she talks about that the wildness of women has been domesticated. You know, so this raw, potent power can be controlled and tamed, but the feminine is rooted in the body, in the earth, in compassion and intuition and community. And women and feminine beings are givers and weavers of lives and midwives and gardeners and healers. And the feminine holds all these life affirming qualities, And women who are comfortable and at home in their authentic expression are very powerful. I'm sure you would agree, because a woman who loves being in her natural skin is very powerful. So I shared that I was working with flower essences at the moment, and I was working with a flower the other week and was meditating and journaling about it. And there was one sentence I repeatedly heard in my head in those days over and over and over again. And the sentence was this: the reason why you came here is not to hate yourself. Hating yourself means complying to their bullshit. And then I had this clarity coming in that this living in lack or unworthiness and cultivating, questioning our bodies, ourselves, and the self-hatred, or even taking away others' women's lights and shaming their bodies and their expression and their essence, means being compliant with the oppressive system of patriarchy that has suppressed and taken away the connection from our own essence in so many ways. And being compliant means reproducing a pain that, if we know what love is, we wouldn't wish it on anyone we love, because it's so destructive, including our daughters or granddaughters. We wouldn't wish it on anyone. And I know in the first moment this might be a little bit of a radical thought, but I feel that this has been a little bit of a wake-up call for me, because I definitely don't want to be compliant to this system, even if unwillingly or subconsciously, a system that has hurt me and my friends and our lineages and countless of women in the past and in the present. And, this is why the first step of healing is the awareness and bringing these patterns from the subconscious to the surface. And, to imagine that I'm going to pass on this pain to following generations breaks my heart truly. And, I'd like to think, because I'd like to live in a magical world, so I like to think maybe it was the flower talking to me. And if it was definitely giving me the tough love of a grandmother, grandmother Earth, that is not holding back and that is reminding us to use our awareness with responsibility and alchemizing what we know is not right, and alchemizing this pain into liberation. And by that, she's handing us the torch and handing the power back to us. So I feel it's really time to step up in a way that is deeper and that is healing us on the deepest level from this spell of disembodiment that has come with Western culture and patriarchy and capitalism and white supremacy, and to step up in a way that creates true liberation, not superficial liberation. Because this kind of liberation requires deep unlearning and being vulnerable and humility and stripping away all the unnecessary shit we don't need and that is holding us back. Because we were not born questioning ourselves and hating the way we look. We were not born fearing aging and having wrinkles. Like, fearing aging, as an example, means fearing living life. It means fearing the full life experience, right? If you think about it. And it's the opposite of life affirming. It's the opposite of life giving and creating. It's destructive. And having these negative thoughts and beliefs about myself is just helping a system that is trying to keep us small and disconnected. So it is complying to a system that is destructive in so many ways to our very own self. So what I learned through this is that it's time to take responsibility. And, although the outer world is really hard and we're facing wars and difficult economy and environmental crises and all these things, and we're busy surviving and coping with that, but we can always start within by rewriting the stories that live for free in our brains and dismantling the inner narratives that keep us small and compliant and disconnected. For example, by when we look at ourselves in the mirror the next time, starting to be mean towards ourselves, to remind ourselves in those moments that these beliefs, these thoughts are not even mine. They're not even my truth. Like, my truth
is I deserve to just be. We deserve to shine in our authentic expression with wrinkles and body fat and gray hair and whatever. And we deserve to experience this one human lifetime with inner peace. Like that is the whole point, without being at war with ourselves. I feel that this is a really important soft kind of revolution, because I do believe that new paradigms begin from within. Because when this awareness anchors in, it will ripple out, and we're going to be able to hear our intuition and to trust our inner wisdom and to even know what we want, know what we want on a deeper level. And when we're cultivating compassion with ourselves, we can cultivate compassion with others, compassion for nature, and establish a real reconnection to nature and a healthy balance and co-creation with nature, and really a life in more harmony and balance and happiness.